Good morning, everyone. My name is Valerie Critchley, and I am the CAO from the town of Amherstburg. Our next session focuses on one of the most significant and challenging municipal crises in recent memory, the Wheatley explosion of August 2021. Today, we are fortunate to hear directly from the municipal leaders who guided Chatham-Kent through this extraordinary event. They will share insights into the realities of emergency management, the legal complexities that followed, and the operational challenges faced during both the immediate response and the long recovery that continues. Please join me in welcoming Michael Duben, Chief Administrative Officer of Chatham-Kent, Dave Taylor, Deputy CAO, and Ryan Brown, Director of Public Works. These leaders will help us understand not only what happened, but also the lessons that can inform and strengthen our own approaches to crisis management in our communities.
Good morning, everybody. Sorry if my voice, I don't know if I'm just coming down with something or I just was yelling at the TV too much last night. We're here to talk to you about the Wheatley explosion. And how many of you are from generally southwestern Ontario area? Yeah, so pretty much everybody in the room. So you're going to want to listen pretty closely to this, I think. I think we're going to start off by first showing you a video. Do I have to hit it again or will it start on its own? No. Well, while that's setting up, I do want to recognize Don Shropshire. Don is here. Don was actually the CAO in Chatham-Kent at the time that the explosion occurred. Don is over there. I remember I was actually on a call with Don that week, and what had happened is that I think it was some sort of ministry COVID call or something like that, or perhaps it was a WOW-C meeting, and Don left abruptly and then came back and indicated that there had been an evacuation. So hopefully they'll be able to show, oh, if I do it, it'll work? Okay. There we go. So we wanted people to see that just to understand the magnitude of it. There were 20 people that were injured. Miraculously, nobody was killed. Still to this day, I don't know how nobody was killed. And part of the challenge I think we had at the time is that there had been a couple of evacuations. And as many as you know, evacuations is quite a thing. And so when you have a couple of them, you get evacuation fatigue. Not everybody necessarily listens to guidance to evacuate a second time. We see this all the time whenever there's emergencies. So 20 people were injured, including a newborn. 2 of our staff were injured as well. And the hospital actually went into a code orange, for some of you knows what that means. So they're treating it as a mass casualty event. So it's a pretty significant event, obviously, in the community at the time. 38 businesses were affected. There were 19 property owners in the immediate area, which these gentlemen will tell you a little bit more about. I wanted to just share with you my experience before we turn it over to these guys. So, I've worked for a number of municipalities. I've been involved in actually other explosions and tornadoes and floods, fires, downtown fires, that sort of thing. Never really seen anything like this because of the longevity of it. And, when I first got to Chatham-Kent, it was about a year or so after the incident had occurred, and the staff were still dealing with it. Very capable, very smart, very professional, very competent staff. And on every other issue, I always had people putting up their hands, providing all kinds of feedback and suggestions and ideas. But I found when it came to meetings about Wheatley, there just wasn't a lot coming from staff. It dawned on me after a while that for whatever reason, whenever we talked about Wheatley, I wasn't getting the same feedback. And I realized that it was because they had suffered trauma themselves. They had been going through this emergency. Many of you have handled floods. What does it last? A week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? In Muskoka, it takes like a month to travel down the watershed. But it's over, right? At some point, it comes to an end. This kept going, and there was no end in sight for anybody. And so it made me realize that there was an emergency fatigue going on in our organization. I don't know exactly what PTSD is, but I really feel that some of our folks that were involved in this were hit really hard, and it was affecting their decision making on this topic. So for me, coming in as a new guy following in Don's footsteps, I'd like to think it helped the team because I didn't have to go through that. So I was able to hopefully guide things forward a little bit. So I do want to just give you a sense of the size of the property. The overhead doesn't really give you a great sense. So if you look at the picture on your bottom left, you see that what is now sort of a brown area. It's much bigger than it looks. It was actually like 19 businesses in that area, and in the top right-hand corner, you can see some of the damage that was caused through the explosion. This is in the heart of Wheatley. This is. Think of those of you that have communities. This is the downtown corner. This is the downtown intersection. It's a community of 3,000 people, and this has devastated the community, and it's still going on, which you're going to hear a little bit more about. So I'm going to turn it over to Ryan Brown here, who is our Director of Public Works and Fleet. And he's been very closely involved with this from day one. And he had friends that were injured in the explosion. So I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning, everyone. So I want to talk a little bit about, in a room of administrators, there's probably not too many people that have oil and gas experience, but there could be one. And I did want to ask too, is anybody from Wheatley? Because I know there's one. So if you don't know, Wheatley is down kind of in the farthest southwest corner at Chatham-Kent. And, if you took a cross section of the earth anywhere here in Wheatley, it shows this is like, the Grand Canyon. You have different layers of rocks. And so on the top, we position things like water wells. So really shallow, a couple hundred feet where we get our water from. But as you go down, there's different layers that contain oil and gas. So some layers have oil, some have more water. And we drill these deep wells to extract the gas or petroleum. But what can happen, imagine this is today. We have great technology, the oil and gas industry is very advanced. But the history of oil and gas in Southern Ontario dates back, over 100 years. And so we're not talking about very complicated stuff. We're talking about wooden pipes, horses that drilled these holes. And so over time, basically to summarize, our biggest challenge we have in Wheatley, which is happening in other areas of Ontario, is that this oil and gas is coming up old wells and crossing over into different layers. So what actually caused the explosion here in Wheatley was that building was connected to a water well, not a gas well. The floor drain was actually directly connected to a water well, but the gas is coming up from these other wells, which there may be one or more in the town, and getting into the water table. And I'll show you a map. Some of you might have seen this. This is a provincial website. Anybody can have access to this information. And this is the known gas wells in Ontario. Known. And in Wheatley, through our story, we don't have time to go through all the technical, but we had one known gas well and we had one unknown gas well that we found. We've found over 14, I think, in total water wells on this one block. So this map doesn't even talk about water wells. And so I think that just brings the scale to it. If we're not talking about a little problem, this is a very big challenge. And you'll see if you go on the website, you can click on these dots. It'll tell you what it knows. Some wells have some information, some have none. But those dots will all have data on them. And some of them will say this dot is accurate to plus or minus 200 meters. Well, that's not very helpful in land use planning decisions because even though we know it's in this area, we don't know exactly where it is on the property. This photo here, there's an aerial photo of downtown Wheatley, and I wanted to show it that the explosion occurred, generally in the middle there at the main corner. That red line was the evacuation that went in place on the evening of the explosion and was in place for almost 2 years before it shrunk to that green line. And then later we were able to shrink it even more. But I think it really shows the scale. We're not talking about one or two people or, evacuating a one farm. There were hundreds of people living here different income levels, people's businesses and their home within the circle, and to have them evacuated for a winter, it really, I think as administrators, we have to think about all the problems in an emergency. It's not just fire. When you have the scale of this kind of problem, where are these people going to go short term and long term? Who's taking care of them? What about the things in their home that, they really cherish? How do you communicate with 100 people to get the same message across? Not only do you have, different backgrounds, we also have some that don't speak English, and Wheatley has a strong different population. So just communicating with that amount of people, really complicated information, and telling them that they can't go back to their home for 2 years is incredibly challenging. And I can tell you the only way the team here got through that is just by proactive, honest communication with every resident, willing to meet them, willing to try to meet their needs to help them cope through this time, while on the back end we're coping with an engineering problem. And so after the explosion, we think to ourselves, okay, well, what action is required? Like, where do we start? This building exploded. Later on, we'll tell you there's a bunch of different investigations, but the fire marshal's office has to do an investigation. Who owns the problem? And if you didn't know, in Ontario, if you have an oil and gas well on your property and there's no leaseholder, so say, if a company comes in and has a lease, but if there's no leaseholder and there's a well on your property, it's yours. And that's very different than other regulatory environments across Canada. Who has the expertise to help us? So we have some wells, some are on our property, some aren't. Who can help us? Because, as local government in Ontario, this isn't in our jurisdiction generally. So who do we turn to for help? And also, who are the stakeholders? So we have all sorts of different groups. Not only do we have residents and businesses and the municipality and the province. This is a picture of Doug Ford here with our fire chief at the main corner, but also the different ministries. If you haven't been through this, the Ministry of Environment regulates water wells that can have gas. The MNRF regulates oil and gas wells, which can have water. And that's caused a lot of confusion early on about, who has the expertise, who owns the problem. And so to summarize a whole lot of engineering work and a bunch of time, and, the date is really important to think about. 2 years we are working on this problem. While the municipality has to move on, Public Works has to plow roads, and the legal department has other work to do. That, we didn't just hire a team that knew what they were doing. We had to use existing staff to figure out how we were going to work through this emergency. And this photo on the screen is one of the known gas wells that we found on this site. But when they abandon it, they often cut it off deep underground so that it's not a hazard on the surface. So we actually had to dig it up and extend it back up to surface and re-plug this well. So during this 2-year period, we plugged 3 water wells on the site. We plugged this old gas well again, but we were left with one well that we drilled as a monitoring well. What's going on in the water table? And even after this 2 years of work, gas still coming out of this well. And we had safety systems on it. We know a lot more about what the problem is. But this is as far as we got, and we spent a lot of money, have a lot of people, who lost their homes during these 2 years over the winter, basements flooding and mold and those kind of issues. So, after 2 years, we weren't really much further ahead. We had a lot of people back home. That was really good for them. But as far as solving the problem, we weren't anywhere there. And so this is a picture, after 2 years of work, you can see in the parking lot area, there's what we call our scrubber unit. So it actually removes the H2S, so hydrogen sulphide gas, which is much more dangerous than methane. That actually removes it from the gas coming out of our well. But we're in this kind of stable condition, but where do we go from here? And so luckily, through some decisions with council, through the support of the province, who, financially has helped us a lot along the way of this journey, we were able to purchase those last properties that we determined were in the evacuation zone. And then we went from emergency problem to planned engineering work. And that was a much different concept, because in an emergency, we have to do things now. There's these pressure and Dave's going to speak to some of the legal aspects. But now this is planned work. We want to dig up this entire site and confirm there are no more gas wells on this site. And so what we did, this picture shows we purchased all the buildings through the support of the province. We tore down all the buildings, but we didn't touch the floor slabs. We had planning meetings, we had contractors lined up, everybody ready to respond because we're looking for a gas well, but what if we find one? And what if it starts going off? We had to have everybody. So we had a drill rig on standby in Sarnia. We had the crews ready to man it, ready to go, entire emergency response plans. And that leads us to this photo. So when we did, we unearthed another gas well that is not on that map that I showed you. And within 7 days, we moved this drilling rig in. This is a real oil and gas rig from Alberta. 24/7 operation. When it starts up, they don't stop running it. And all the supporting crews, not only the engineers and the folks working in the oil industry, but University of Windsor was a huge support for us. They had a trailer on site doing all sorts of geotechnical work while we were doing it. So it was a production, and it was the first time in the emergency where during those 2 years I told you, people were saying, what is going on? Why is this taking so long? And we had community meetings on these nights and people were saying, can you please slow down? This is going too fast. And so after about 10 days, we had drilled out this oil and gas well. And, overwhelmingly, the problems still exist in Wheatley. It's not solved. And, I don't know if it'll ever be officially solved, but we're in a much better position. We know that site is stable. We know everything about it. This is a photo you might have heard in the news. So just down the road, about 200 meters, is our library, which was actually our emergency headquarters for the whole emergency. And we actually had a water well pop up in the backyard, start emitting some gas and water in the backyard of the library. So luckily we own this property, and luckily Chatham-Kent now has a bit of expertise to respond. We didn't have to have an evacuation. We resolved the problem, and within a few weeks we were able to bring in a little drilling rig and plug this water well. But it shows you that can happen anywhere. Our emergency response center was right beside this, and this was the smoking area. Nobody knew there's a well there. It's not on any map. And so it really shows you the problem in Wheatley continues to evolve, but we are looking forward because we know so much about the site, because we brought in the right people through the province's financial support. There's a team of local citizens that's working with staff to how do we redevelop this site. The municipality now owns a very prime piece of location in downtown, and through community input have come up with what's the path forward. They've designed a park for the community that's kind of lacking. This site will maybe integrate some engineering equipment to control some of the gas we still have, but it's a way to really move forward with the community that's been through a lot to give them a breath of fresh air. And finally, before I turn it over to Dave, I just want to highlight, why is this important to you? I know we're here telling an interesting story, but as per that map, this is an Ontario-wide issue. This is not just a Chatham-Kent issue. One thing that you may have not heard about, but the province of Ontario is working on a carbon capture and storage framework and policy, which is, we're going to drill deeper than ever before, and we're going to pump liquid CO2 into these reservoirs under the ground. And so there's a lot of potential risk with that. And I wanted to make sure everybody was aware that if you want to read about carbon capture in Ontario, it is something they're actively engaged in. And also as our communities grow. So, Niagara on the Lake, as it continues, or other places expand into, farms that had never had urban development, there could be oil and gas wells on that farm you don't know about. So how do we sustainably grow into these areas, knowing the risks? And the photo here, the reason I show it, why is this important? This is the only building on the block we didn't have to tear down because it exploded 100 years ago. And that photo is from the other end of the street, about 3 doors down from the building that we had an explosion at. So this has been a legacy issue in Wheatley. This could be a legacy issue in your town, but you don't know about it. You've never read the papers from 1890. So I thank you for your time. I know that was not a lot of technical, a high-level overview, but Dave's here and he's going to talk about a little bit more of the legal ramifications.
So I'm currently the deputy CAO in Chatham-Kent, but during this emergency, I was in the role of Director of Legal Services. And so while Ryan and his team were working on the operations side of things, on figuring out everything they needed to know to essentially get a master's degree in oil and gas engineering, I was trying to worry about all of these different investigations and all of these different ministries that were knocking on our door to talk to us about this. A whole host of investigations. Of course, Ryan's already talked about first the province retained Golder to do a pathways analysis, try to find where this was coming from. They found a well, they capped it, but we still kept on getting gas into the shallow aquifer. And then ultimately the municipality really stepped in with our consultant and a company out of Alberta called Elm 360 and did a second investigation, bought all of those properties. Imagine trying to buy 19 properties, demolish them all in order to then move forward with a second level of gas exploration. Found the well, probably the best day of my career so far when Ryan told me they found the well, and actually dug that thing out, capped it, and we saw reduced levels of gas coming up, but now still some gas coming up. You know, that's the technical investigation. But at the same time, we have the Ministry of Labor, of course, a bunch of employees got injured here, right? So Ministry of Labor knocking on our door, and they're a hard one to push off to say, I got other stuff going on this week. And so we had to deal with that. The ombudsperson had a series of investigations. I remember Don and I walking from one meeting where we're trying to deal with on the ground emergency stuff to then sit down with the ombudsperson from Ontario who had complaints from citizens about my garbage isn't happening and I don't get mail where I used to get mail. And also I have concerns about this massive explosion that happened in my downtown, and trying to explain all of this to them and answer all of those questions. The fire marshal's office, as Ryan indicated, they needed to figure out where this explosion happened from, what was the cause of all of this. And then on top of all of that, we had a $100 million class action lawsuit. We have insurance for $50 million. So I'll tell you, as you know, the director of legal services at the time, that was a tough night to go to bed when you think about where's that extra 50 coming from if we ever end up in that spot. So I share that with you, not that you know, to make you feel bad for Dave or Don or Michael or Ryan, but because on top of the solving the engineering problem, which was a huge task to try to solve, and dealing with all the public concerns, we had these overlapping investigations, and that put just a whole other level of pressure that we already had on our staff. So we're in a situation to where, much like what you all did probably during COVID, you have to redeploy staff to try to get this thing done, try to solve problems. At the same time, we're also having people already looking backwards as to what happened. And we have our lawyers for our insurance company who was great about all of this, but coming to us getting ready for this class action lawsuit. I can tell you, when we went and did the records pulling, part of your obligation you have to do in a class action lawsuit is pull all relevant records in order to be able to share those with the other side. 1 million records were produced. Unbelievable to think about, right? Thank God we've got AI now to look through all of those things for us. But that's just a scope of what we were looking at here in terms of all these different investigations and how they all kind of cross over. And it really just put even more pressure on our staff. So there's a couple of different challenges, and Ryan and Michael already touched on a number of these, but just wanted to really pull them forward to you in terms of when we did some debriefs at different stages of this emergency. A few of the challenges and pressures that we really see as kind of lessons learned or pieces we wanted to bring forward. So one of them is the jurisdictional kind of dispute as between ministries of the province and between the province and the municipality. So municipalities, we are not regulators of gas. In fact, if you tried to pass a licensing bylaw to require licensing for gas, you would be told you can't do that. So what that means is that we have very few powers in relation to oil and gas exploration that would then put us into a spot to be able to respond to this kind of emergency, right? It would make sense that whoever regulates this is also the one that's going to respond to this. But instead, what we actually found is the province was pointing to the FPPA, the Fire Prevention Protection Act, as being a tool that the municipality could use, and the Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act, which you're all aware of, as the powers that we could use. But those are not precise powers. They don't deal with anything to do with oil and gas. They just really talk to the fact that you can declare an emergency and then start doing things to address the emergency. And the fire chief has some powers to deal with, you know, the causes of explosions, but that's not in the context of an oil and gas from pumping deep underground. And so we have that problem where the province was looking at us, and I remember Don probably having to give me a kind of, you know, a little bit of a psychological session after some of the meetings with the province where I'm saying, Like, how are they not taking the lead on this one? Like, we do not have the expertise. They say, we'll figure it out, Dave, we'll figure it out. But, you know, that uncertainty between the province and the municipalities who are dealing with this is tough. And as Ryan mentioned, one ministry deals with water wells, a different ministry deals with gas wells, and they were both kind of pointing at each other, like, we're not really sure whose this is. If we don't know it's a gas well, do we even have powers? That's a huge problem. So that's a big pressure, and I don't think it's been fully solved yet. On the expertise side of things, municipalities also just don't have engineers that are going to be experienced in this. Ryan was able to figure a lot of this stuff out. His team was able to figure out a lot of this stuff. We have to use some good consultants, but none of them had any sort of background in this, nor would we expect all 444 municipalities in Ontario to have somebody or a team on staff that could possibly know oil and gas stuff, right? And so that really is a problem because as the province continues, I would say, in the oil and gas strategy that I'll talk about on the next slide, look to the municipalities to be a leader in this area. That lack of expertise just really causes me pause, real concern, because you all would know, don't put someone who doesn't have competence in a technical area in charge of something, right? Like that's a health and safety 101. And so the idea that we're being asked to be the leaders on any of this when our folks can't possibly be competent and ready to respond to these kinds of things, I think that's a huge issue that continues to exist. Even though the province is doing significant work right now in their oil and gas strategy, they still seem to suggest a municipal lead is going to be a part of that. And then the piece of data. So Ryan actually just mentioned one thing is just a quick comment. The way that gas wells have been historically abandoned is you're done the gas well, you pump a whole bunch of concrete down there and whatever other stuff down there to try to stop it pumping out. Then you actually dig down 6 feet and you lop off the top of the gas well and backfill all of that. So weirdly enough, the two locations in which Ryan's team ultimately found gas wells, I'd parked on top of one of them and I was going to a meeting once and I had dinner on top of another one. Like they were under buildings because that's how they were capped back in the day, right? The idea was it's capped, it's good, keep on using it. So we don't actually even know where all the data is or where all the gas wells are. We don't have that data. The province is working on that now. They're actually trying to kind of round out some of that data. But that has implications for land use planning because you can say don't build within X distance of the well, but where's the well? As Ryan said, when you go click on some of those dots on that map, it's plus or minus 200 meters. It's a big chunk of our town. And so that really is a big issue for what could we even do in the area of land use planning. And that is relevant to growth because we're expanding our towns into what are historically farm fields. Not a huge problem if you find a gas, well, it's a problem, but less of a problem if a gas well comes up in the middle of a farm field. But it's a real big problem if it's the downtown or a new subdivision. I know some of our towns, our colleagues in other towns have dealt with that. So as I said, the province is working on an oil and gas strategy, which is really good. They're getting better data. They're trying to come up with best practices. Certainly in Chatham-Kent, they provided a significant amount of money. They provided $29 million to Chatham-Kent, which is huge, obviously. And ultimately, you know, I would say those first couple of weeks, months, it was a bit of a tough go with the province, but they hugely came to the table for us over the years. But they still are expecting the municipalities to take a significant lead. And I have a concern about that. They also added some changes to the oil and gas legislation that gives their inspectors better powers to go onto a property, to order if there's a public health risk, to order work to occur. But ultimately, as Ryan mentioned, it's still the well owner that would be responsible for that. They have a separate program called the Abandoned Well Works Program where the province will fund it. But it's kind of like you find the well, you tell the province, and then they make a decision about whether they're going to help you with some funding, which can put the owners in a real disincentive to go look for their well or to report their well. So there's still a lot of challenges in this area about how this is all structured in Ontario. And remember, we showed this slide already. You know, just think to yourselves in your teams, if this pops in one of your towns, if one of these pops and we end up with gas pumping out of it, what's your kind of feeling about your team's readiness to be the lead agency on that, to be the lead response group? I'm guessing it's not great because we don't have a bunch of oil and gas experts. So we did want to get, though, on those kind of pieces of warning about the current situation, about some ultimate lessons learned. And we've already covered some of these as we talked through the slide deck. The first is the matter of communications. I would say that as an administrative team, we felt in the early days of this, we were communicating and over communicating and doing a really, really good job of it. The community still didn't feel like that was enough. It really had to be daily communications, even if it's nothing changed from yesterday. That was probably one of our best lessons learned. Public meetings were hugely important. As Ryan mentioned, like actually talking to people face to face is far better than them getting any sort of like email blast. But the email blasts are also really important because we found that there was people who were concerned about this because maybe they have a family member who lives in Wheatley, but they're not anywhere nearby. They might be out in Calgary or in Vancouver. But them, hearing some update about what's going on was important if they have a loved one that lived nearby. We had a dedicated website. We set that up pretty early so that we could just put up all the reports. There's a lot of technical reports. People want to see them. Let's just get an easy spot for them to all go to. And for regular updates, all the press releases went there. We did a reassurance campaign. This is a redeployment of a lot of staff and our fire department going around door to door and talking with people, asking them contact information. Do you have medical issues? Just learning about the people that are there. No data set exists for that in every part of your communities, right? You don't have easy text messages or emails for all of them. As I said, we started a subscription service, and then more recently, we actually moved to what's called CK Alert, which is an Everbright program, which allows for just a push out of emergency alerts, very much similar to an Amber Alert within anybody who signs up within Chatham-Kent within a kind of a certain area. So this is a good tool that we at least learned from in this emergency to then be better positioned for emergencies in the future, allows for quick messaging out to anybody who might be affected. Redeployment plans was a lesson that we learned here, and I'm sure many of you learned that in your COVID experience in municipal government as well, which is, something's happening over here, but it actually put pressures on other portions of the team. You need to know who can move around, and it's a different kind of skill set that you might be looking for in any given time. So one of the things that we kind of found is that, you might think you need people in oil and gas and emergency response, but it's often, is somebody a half decent project manager? Are they the kind of person that can actually solve a problem with imperfect information or at least plot a path out? Are they a good communicator, someone who can maybe actually go out and meet with some folks? And we're going to just pull them from their team in order to go out in this reassurance campaign we did just to talk to people, explain things, listen to their concerns, make sure people are feeling heard. Those types of redeployment plans are hugely important. And we had to also consider, as we all did during COVID, the backfilling to keep other functions. Once Ryan was working 24/7 on this thing, essentially, we needed somebody else stepping into his public works role. When I was working on this, I needed other people to step into my legal role in order to keep the wheels on, as you would. One of our general managers, April Reedick, she was a mentor to me. She's retired now, but her phrase was always "remember the people," and I thought it was a really good one in the context of this emergency. People's lives were impacted by this, as it was multiple years that they were out. They originally couldn't get their documentation, like their wills or their birth certificate. We got firefighters in there to get them in a safe way. But, they might have had specialized equipment at their houses. They weren't able to run their businesses. A lot of them had built their entire kind of their family around a business, and now that business you can't even go in the building, let alone run it. That's a huge impact on people's lives. It's a huge impact on the community as well, right? Like, because it was that core central area of our community, people lost that sense of community. There wasn't a place to go to. You didn't have the post office. You couldn't go downtown. That was the bar you maybe went to, or the Legion was within this block. So that was a significant piece, and really something that we tried to keep front and center. And then, of course, for our staff as well, right? As Michael mentioned, people experience PTSD. There's a lot of trauma, and just remembering to check in on each other in these emergencies. We all focus on just trying to get it done, but you got to check in on each other to say, how are you actually doing today? I think many of our staff were good in that. And then ultimately, at the last point here, and then I'll stop, is the provincial oil and gas legacy strategy that they have, better than it was when we started this emergency, but still significant issues, I think. Expecting municipal response as the lead, I don't think is appropriate. We've pitched this many times in the ways that we've been able to speak to the province. There needs to be a centralized expert team at the Ministry of Natural Resources who has all the tools, all the skills, scrubber systems like what we used, air monitoring, and knows the drill and can come in and take control of that. That's the model that needs to be in place, and we need to push that. We also need policy direction then. So once the data is gathered and we have these issues with data, we then need, I think the province really should be setting a provincial-wide policy on how far you can build away from a gas well, an abandoned gas well. It doesn't make sense to be 5 meters one place and 15 meters somewhere else, or 50 meters somewhere else, right? That should be a province-wide thing. It doesn't change community to community. And then, as I've already talked about, I won't cover it again, just the jurisdictional clarification between the municipality and the province, and then as between provincial ministries. There needs to just be somebody to go at the very beginning of that emergency. Those first minutes, hours, and days are hugely important. You don't want to be sitting there wondering kind of who's on first. So thanks very much for that. Turn it back over to Michael.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so I think we have a bit of time. We can take some questions. I did want to, just point out that this is the type of thing that you just don't plan on having this. We all deal with a lot of issues. You don't expect to wake up one day and find out that the downtown has exploded. And these guys have done a great job. Don, when he was there, did a great job as well. I would just urge you, as you work on your plans, a lot of you are probably working on emergency management plans. If you're not, you should be. Often when you do sort of contingency plans, you usually plan for short-term emergencies. Keep in mind that if you have a long-term emergency, because don't forget, we also had something called COVID that was happening at the same time. We also had some flooding that happened. We had some really bad winter storms that happened as well. So we've been in emergency mode for a long time, and people just get tired. So I just urge you to keep that in mind. Where's Kyle Pratt? So Kyle and I lived in Tillsonburg for a while, and Kyle knows probably exactly what I'm going to say, which is there's a portion of property just west of downtown where everybody kind of holds their noses, right? Because you walk over that. There's a bridge downtown, and it smells like hydrogen sulphide, and everybody just it just smells bad in that section of town. Interestingly enough, when I first came to Chatham, I was getting my cable hooked up in my house, and the guy who was doing the work said, "Oh yeah, I'm from Wheatley," and he said, we've been smelling sulphide for years, or sulfur for years. So it's one of those things we just overlook it. But don't overlook it. If you have that smell, or if you have anything in your communities that you think is going to be a problem, you should look at it now. And the province is in a much better position now than they ever were before. As you heard during the emergency, there was a lot of this. No one knew what was going on. Nobody. And I can't blame anybody. It was like COVID. Nobody knew what they were dealing with. Everybody's kind of making the best decisions they could with the little information they had. I don't know if Dave said this, but the province has come to the table. They've probably contributed over close to $30 million when all is said and done, because these are massive, massive engineering projects that take place. And they also supported the community. The representative action, what's the other word for it? Thank you. The class action suit has been pulled. They're not proceeding because the plaintiffs decided not to go ahead. But I think part of it is because they got so much money from the province. When you have a class action lawsuit, you have to establish that there's been some damages. And I think it was going to be harder for them to establish that there's been some damages, because the province did step up and help the businesses and some of the individuals quite handsomely. So do we have time for questions? Yeah? Go ahead. Yeah. You guys should probably answer that. Yeah.
Thanks for the question. I can speak to that. So, we didn't cover everything, but there had been 2 previous odor complaints of gas in the months prior to the explosion. And so the first one, evacuation, gas goes away, lots of complications about how long do you do an evacuation. So on the night of the explosion, there was monitors in the basement that we had already put there for hydrogen sulfide. And so fire call came in, fire rolls, evacuation starts, and then it wasn't until I believe about 45 minutes or so had passed before the explosion. So they were actually doing an evacuation of the area during the explosion. That's why the fire truck was there. And luckily, that's why no one died, was because we had that 45-minute heads up due to those monitors to start getting people away from the building.
Yeah, and I should point out too that the closest hazmat team to Wheatley or to Chatham-Kent is Windsor. So we've had to work very closely with Windsor, even recently this summer when Ryan was explaining the release behind the library. But I would suggest that our staff now and our fire department are probably more knowledgeable than even the hazmat folks in Windsor, at least in terms of this type of emergency. So we've learned a lot from this. And, we're happy to help any other municipalities if you need some support down the road. I think, Mr. Creary, yes, sir.
To make corporate decisions, the council takes the vote. How do you do that?
Yeah, Yeah, thanks, David. Yeah, the beauty is we actually are finally in a spot just a couple weeks ago that we learned that because the province provided $8.5 million or so in resident and community support, that the representative plaintiffs of the class action have decided to discontinue it, which is great news for our community. So it kind of puts us into a better spot from that. But really early on, what I would say, we had a lot of debates about, okay, we're sharing information to the public about this because we want them to know what's happening in their community, and they're owed that. But at the same time, are those the exact same records that, you know, is going to be exhibit 1 in the trial for $100 million? And how do you balance that? And I think we made a conscious decision. I mean, I welcome Don's thoughts, but we made a conscious decision at the administrative level to say, it kind of is what it is at that point. Like, you know, we're just going to have to share everything we know. And later on, if a judge says this line in that document should have told you X, Y, or Z, we all know that that's the armchair quarterback that happens in legal processes. But balancing between, we have to be a responsive level of government and we need to share everything that we got, and just say we were trying to work reasonably within this unbelievably complicated situation in which there was no playbook. Like, we're just going to own that. And I kind of actually shared that even with our insurance company. It's IPE, so I'm happy to say, because they were sponsoring here. You know, they were pretty responsive to that as well, which is, it's, you know, it's not every press release or every communication needs to run through your lawyers and all that kind of stuff. I got a lot of phone calls from the fire chief. He referred to the legal department as the fire department's 911 for a little bit there, because he was checking to say, can I say this? And ultimately, it's kind of like, just explain it, say it, and on the back end, you know, who knows what someone will argue about all of it. But between those two of being quiet in order to help for some legal theory later on, or sharing and then just showing that we were a responsive level of government, we landed on the second of those to say that was the better approach.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure that we've done anything special. I don't think we can stand up here and say that we did anything special. We meet regularly. We definitely, you know, support each other. Yeah, one of the things that I think we've done is allowed our staff, Ryan in particular, and our fire chief and Dave as well, to go out and share your story. This is not the first time Ryan's done a presentation. Dave has done some presentations with municipal lawyers. Our fire chief has done a number of presentations. I think that's part of it, allowing people the time off to get away, tell their story, reflect on it. I think talking about it is an important thing. We, quite frankly, just have hardworking people. I'd love to say that, you know, we've got some sort of special program. We don't. We just have people who are hardworking, and all of us have people that report to us that are quite good, that have stepped up. You know, the province has helped a little bit as well. I will give the province some credit. They did fund a position, sort of an economic development type position. So this is an individual who works in Wheatley. She's actually located in Wheatley. And she has been sort of our ears on the ground for, I'm going to say, a year and a half now. And that has helped take a little bit of pressure off, because we don't have to immediately jump to, oh, we need to have a public meeting. We also did hire, in fairness, we did hire a couple of extra people in fire. We dedicated one of our assistant chiefs specifically to Wheatley. And then there was another fellow, Paul Walker, but not that that'll mean anything to you, but he was dedicated to it as well. And I think that did take a little bit of pressure off, certainly of the fire department and public works. And because we had that individual on the ground, it took some pressure off of communications as well. So just adding a few more resources, I guess, is what did it. But no, these folks have been through a lot, and there's really, you know, there's really not much else that I can say about that. So I think one more question? No more questions? Okay, well, thanks for listening to us today. We're happy to share our story with anybody who has any individual questions about it. I do just want to warn all of you, if you're in southwestern Ontario, you saw the map. Don't take it lightly. The province is stepping up, but I do fear that if something did happen, you guys are going to be the ones who are going to have to solve the problem. And if that does happen to you, hopefully it doesn't, we're certainly there to help. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much to Michael, Ryan, and Dave. That was really eye-opening and rather sobering as well.